The year was 1978. Menachem Begin, Anwar Sadat, and Jimmy Carter signed the Camp David Accords, winning Begin and Sadat the Nobel Peace Prize. In Tehran, 2 million people took to the streets to protest against the Shah of Iran. Here in New York, Ed Koch was serving his first of 12 years as mayor. When he took over from Abe Beame, New York City was staring bankruptcy in the teeth. The government rescued us with a highly controversial $2 billion bailout. Pete Rose got his 3,000th hit in 1978. Kobe Bryant was born. The LDS Church opened heaven and perhaps somewhat more reluctantly their temples for the first time to blacks. Disco was the craze, and the Bee Gees had 5 of the top 8 songs on the Billboard 100. The Susan B. Anthony dollar was minted, never to be seen again. The best-selling book of the year was Irma Bombach's If Life is a Bowl of Cherries, What Am I Doing in the Pits? And All Souls, a smallish church, some 75, appearing on a Sunday by 1977, with a great history and a hearty vision, was searching for a new minister. That is where I pop into the picture. On paper, anyway, if any of the dozens of candidates who sought the All Souls pulpit was less qualified to assume it than I was when I arrived here 30 years ago this month, I would be shocked. The first thing I did in self-protection was to lower the All Souls pulpit by 6 or 8 feet. They built me this little portable pulpit, nice little portable pulpit, which I've used ever since. After all, I'd preached fewer than 10 sermons my entire life, 3 of them about Thomas Jefferson. Relying on past experience alone, projected over a 30-sermon preaching schedule my first year, that would translate into 9 sermons on Thomas Jefferson. In other words, about 9 sermons too many. I spent the summer before I assumed your pulpit reading the collected sermons of A. Powell Davies and Harry Emerson Fosdick. This made me an expert of sorts in the linear left-brain pulpit style of the 1930s and 40s. Then I put together 30 manila folders, alternating between social action, spirituality, theology, history, Christmas. You get the idea. Then I started looking for jokes. Right after Christmas, I received a visitation from Maxine Bashirs, the first woman to serve as our church president. After a few awkward formalities, she said, "Forrest, a number of people have asked me to speak to you about your sermons. Could you perhaps spend a little more time preparing them?" Ouch. I had been preparing my sermons by the numbers. 15 hours a week, mulling books and articles in my study, at least 8 hours writing on Saturdays, and then up at dawn on Sunday to polish my mighty efforts with a final sheen. If I'd spent any more time preparing my sermons, I'd have had precious little time left over to perform my other ministerial duties. Time, of course, was not the problem. Life experience was. As I've told you before, I didn't really become a minister until I'd performed my first funeral. From that day forward, you took me by the hand, leading me one by one through the valley of the shadow and all the other valleys you traversed in your lives. I began telling stories in my sermons, your stories. I shared your courage and faith. I became a preacher. My plan this morning was to offer a synopsis of All Souls' growth and development over the past 30 years, how we slowly added programs and enhanced our in-reach and outreach and became once again, as we had been in the 19th century, a flagship church. The problem was this. My sermon began to be littered with numbers, percentages, and dollar signs. Despite the fact that I'm doing remarkably well holding my cancer at bay, so well that after 2 or 3 poignant farewell sermons, I'm almost embarrassed this morning to I'm almost embarrassed this morning to be seen in public upright. I still am too weak to beat my chest for 20 minutes, so I'm not going to do that. Instead, let me share with you 5 things I've learned about the ministry over my 30 years among you. Since we Unitarian Universalists embrace the priesthood of all believers, what I've learned may, I hope, illuminate your ministries here as well. First, remember what the word itself means. Not magister, the greatest of these, but minister, the least. To minister is to serve. Though I had earned a PhD, I quickly put the kibosh on those of you who tried to call me Dr. Church. I know the Calvinist tradition from which we stem honored the magisterium above all other offices. We still wear, as Calvin did, academic robes. But that's a trap. Pride is the greatest and most seductive sin. Never forget, and you probably never will forget, I've repeated it so often, the most instructive of etymologies: human, humane, humanitarian, humility, humble, humus, dust to dust, which in pastoral terms means heart to heart.